morning, everyone. I am Kamla Rampersad de Silva, Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our special panel discussion this morning on the impact on the business sector of rising tensions between the US and Venezuelan government. This session is going to be carried via live stream today, at least part of it, on our YouTube channel and our LinkedIn page. And that is because this is such a serious and important topic for us, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but around the region. So just part of our discussions would be on live stream. For all of you who are here in the room with us, we are so pleased to have you. We have 4 very special panelists for today, each of whom are appearing on a CCGI forum for the first time. I want to thank each of them sincerely. Reshma Advani Rojas, Lorraine Pouchet, Ken Hackshaw, and Martha Miller. I will introduce each of them more fully in a few minutes. First, I want to set the context. The rising tensions between the United States and Venezuela are often discussed in the halls of geopolitics in terms of sanctions, military posturing, and diplomatic maneuvers. But here in the Caribbean, we don't just observe these developments from a distance, we feel them. They ripple through our ports, our supply chains, our tourism arrivals, and our energy sector. For businesses in the Caribbean, this is not a theoretical foreign policy debate. It is a pressing risk management and strategic planning imperative. Why is this conversation so urgent for us? Because our region's prosperity is built on stability, connectivity, and predictability. The Caribbean sees our economic lifeline. Any significant disruption in this basin directly threatens the core of our commerce. So today we will explore 3 plausible scenarios, each representing a different kind of shock to our system. The first, open military conflict. The scenario of direct conflict would fundamentally redraw the map of regional trade, jeopardize maritime security, and create humanitarian and logistical crises that no business continuity plan is currently equipped to handle. Second, the scenario of a protracted standoff, amplified by external actors, would mean living with a permanent cloud of volatility. A world of unpredictable sanctions, sudden shipping diversions, spiking insurance costs, and the chilling effect of uncertainty on investment. Our third scenario is the possibility of a negotiated deal. While seemingly the most positive, this would bring a complex recalibration. It would reshape energy markets, alter the competitive landscape, and require agile businesses to quickly navigate a new set of rules and opportunities. Our purpose today is not to predict which path will unfold, but to prepare our business mindsets for all of them. We must move from being passive observers to proactive architects of our own resilience. How do we secure our supply chains? How do we diversify our energy sources? How do we protect our investments and find opportunity in dislocation? This panel is a starting point, a crucial step in shifting this geopolitical challenge from a boardroom worry into a structured business analysis. The decisions made in Washington and Caracas will shape our context, but the decisions we make in our own companies and organizations will determine our future. So again, I want to thank our panelists for helping us to explore this vital conversation. Now, we have quite a lot of CCGI members present with us today. Welcome to all of you. Let me also formally welcome those of you who are joining us for the first time. I'm happy to share a bit on CCGI. We established nonprofit organization, membership-based since 2012, and currently enjoy over 300 members from a range of private and public sector organizations across the Caribbean region. In fact, our membership includes persons from Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, Guyana, Belize, the British Virgin Islands, St. Martin, Suriname, and of course here in Trinidad and Tobago. And through our bundle membership with JMMB, we also have members from the Dominican Republic and Colombia. There are lots of benefits to being part of a vibrant organization like ours, including benefiting from discounts to our many sessions. I also want to quickly announce that our digital version of the inaugural publication of CCGI's Constellation is freely available on our website. This publication gives the history of CCGI and illuminates and celebrates those who have contributed to our growth and development over the years. So those of you who may be interested in advertising with us, I'm happy to share we are offering a 10% discount by the end of the year. But let me also say, if you are not yet a member of CCGI, do consider joining us and actively contribute to the conversations on how we can improve leadership and governance to achieve sustainable outcomes. Persons may join us as individual members, or as I mentioned, we have bundle membership, which can cover 6 to 12 persons. We currently have approximately 30 organizations across the region that are bundle members. Just as we get into our panel discussions, I have some quick housekeeping announcements. I have stated it before, but let me repeat. We need to know who are the persons in the room with us, so make sure that your name is correctly captured on your devices. This is because we're in a virtual room and everyone is able to easily access everyone else. So please, let's make sure you are easily identifiable. We also ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute throughout the discussion. During the Q&A, if you have a question and you are invited to speak, please make your contribution very brief and quick. And then we would appreciate if you mute your microphone again to minimize any disruptive noises in your background. Finally, we'll put a survey link at the end of the panel discussion to get your feedback. We would appreciate if you take 2 minutes and make sure to give us that feedback, please, because it helps us to plan and ensure that we are meeting your needs. Let me also thank our CCGI team that is providing support today. Laura Sinanan, who manages the room logistics, Quentrell De Silva, who is running the live stream, and Monique Romano, who will post the survey link. All three will be managing the Zoom room as well. We are really very fortunate to have these 3 young people working with us. And now to introduce our panelists for today. Their very illustrious profiles are in the detailed agenda that was sent to you via email this morning. But Laura, I will ask you to please put the detailed profile in the chat as well for anyone who did not get it. And we will begin our panelists with Reshma Advani Rojas. So Reshma is the Managing Director of Advanced Commercial Equipment Limited and Chief Executive Officer of the Odin Group of Companies, a fast-growing multinational in food service and hospitality solutions. With over 2 decades of experience in designing and outfitting restaurants, hotels, and institutions across the Caribbean and Latin America, she has built a reputation for turning complex operations into profitable, scalable solutions. Known for her candid, witty style and forward-thinking approach, Reshma blends business strategy, design expertise, and leadership development to drive growth in emerging markets. And while she's not building companies, she's building leaders, mentoring women, founders, and executives to think bigger and move faster. Our second panelist to join us is Lorraine Pouchet. Lorraine has operated in Trinidad's tourism industry for the past 37 years. She's president of the Trinidad and Tobago Incoming Tour Operators Association, interim chair of the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Tourism Associations, and a recipient of the Ministry of Tourism's 2007 Women of Excellence in Tourism Award. She also served as a board member of the state-owned company, National Entrepreneurship Development Company, a board member of the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Service Industries, and more recently as chairman of the board of National Carnival Commission. She operates as marketing director of Enjoy Tours, a destination management company she owns with her husband. And now I'd like to introduce Ken Hackshaw. Ken is joining us from Florida. He's the managing director and lead consultant at KH Business Consulting Limited. He's the founder and president of the Caribbean Risk Management Academy and the chief executive officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Risk Management Institute. He's also the senior lecturer of the International Certificate in Enterprise Risk Management. His international career spans 23 years working in New York and London in the fields of operational risk management, international operations, and business process reengineering. He has held various senior executive positions, including senior risk analyst at the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation in New York, vice president, Deutsche Bank in New York and London, and vice president, Electronic Data Systems in New York. And our fourth panelist today is Martha Miller. Martha is the Chief Executive Officer of National Rums of Jamaica and a trailblazer in the global business landscape, defying gender norms and making history in the Jamaica rum industry. She joined National Rums Company as the Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Secretary in 2013, became Deputy CEO in March of 2020, and less than a year later, Martha shattered the glass ceiling, becoming the first woman to hold the title of CEO in both National Rums of Jamaica and the Jamaica rum industry. She's the third vice president of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and is one of 6 CEOs honored as the ultimate and most admirable CEO in the international rum industry in 2022. In 2023, she was further celebrated by the Ultimate Awards New York Rum Edition as the ultimate and most admirable CEO. So, a very warm welcome to all of our panelists. As you realize, they come with a lot of great experience behind them. So I can't wait to hear from all of our panelists. We'll begin with Reshma. So Reshma, as I shared earlier, we offered 3 likely scenarios for discussions today. These are the US attacks Venezuela and creates a real conflict zone in the Caribbean. 2, there may be protracted standoff, or 3, the US makes a deal with Venezuela and leaves the area without all-out war. So let's hear your perspectives. The virtual floor is all yours for the next 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Kamla, for inviting me to this conversation and to our esteemed panel as well. I don't think I've been included in a group of this caliber before, so it's a bit intimidating, but hear me out. I come to this conversation not as a foreign policy specialist. I'm a Caribbean business owner who has to live with the knock-on effects in real time. So my world is containers, contracts, staff, banks, board papers. And when these big countries have disagreements, small open economies like ours feel it in ordinary places. So the port, the foreign exchange queue, the cost of insurance, and the mood in the boardroom. So we sit in a region that depends on 3 fragile things, right? So confidence, connectivity, and cooperation. Confidence is that we are a relatively stable part of the map. Connectivity through air and sea, so people and goods can reach us, and cooperation among ourselves, so we're not standing alone in front of global shocks. But when tensions rise between the United States and Venezuela, all 3 of these things come under quiet pressure. And that's where us as boards and private sector have the real work to do. So let's say if tensions were to harden into a visible conflict zone in our basin, the headlines would focus first on security and on energy. But the private sector would feel a tightening around the chest when it comes to money and when it comes to movement. Leaders would look again at their models. Investors would look again at their timelines. shipping, aviation, all of them will revisit their approach. And nobody has to announce that the Caribbean is a higher risk. The terms just start to incrementally shift, and you can feel that. So in that sort of environment, the practical response for boards is to treat access to capital and trade routes as strategic assets, not background services. That means reviewing how dependent businesses on short-term credit that could be repriced very quickly, and deliberately hitting some shifts into more stable facilities while the markets are still relatively calm. It also means looking at where your goods actually travel, because if you are reliant on which ports and which hubs, if you don't have a regional alternative, you're talking about your preferred route becoming more complex or more expensive. So it's less exciting than talking about geopolitics, right? But that is not my expertise. So I'm just talking about how companies can avoid being stunned when a corridor suddenly becomes a headache. At the same time, a conflict would test us, right? Because this is now where a difficult conversation comes to play. Can we really believe in regionalism, or just quote it? Is this just people talking, or is there going to be some real regionalism when this is an issue? Because if shipping around certain waters becomes more complicated, the firms that have practical relationships with suppliers and partners in other CARICOM states will immediately be in a stronger position. Those who only ever looked north will find themselves scrambling, because those private sector leaders have to push for regional sourcing, push for regional logistics. And CARICOM has to stop treating us as though the single market economy is an academic exercise. We have to remove petty non-tariff barriers, harmonize basic standards, and fix inter-island transport so they're not nice to haves anymore. This is risk mitigation. Now, the second part, because I mean, 8 minutes is a long time, but I could harp on this for a while, because the second part is what I think we're at now, which is a long, drawn-out standoff. I mean, it's not a dramatic incident, but it's like this background of sanctions, the kind of mixed signals, a lot of military posturing in our neighborhood. And it does feel less urgent, but in a way, it is more corrosive because it slowly kind of undermines planning. In that environment, you see a lot of hesitation from projects. It's not collapsing. Investors will say they're interested, but they're waiting to see. Banks are willing, but they want more than one document, they want more than one committee meeting, and they ask for things that they didn't ask for in the past. Foreign exchange is always an issue, but there'll be enough to function, but tight enough that everybody becomes in a point of like permanent negotiation. And then for private sector, you get this kind of permanent improvisation. You react week by week. This is where I think boards need to earn their fees. A prolonged standoff is an invitation to stop winging it and start managing external risk. So if we deliberately manage it like we would payroll or any other expense, companies can quantify how sensitive they are to long periods of uncertainty. So how many months of uneven demand can they carry? How much FX volatility can their margins absorb? How much can the cost of capital rise before investment stops making sense? These are not theoretical questions. They belong in board packs with numbers next to them. And this is the kind of regional analysis that institutions like CDB, CARICOM Secretariat can support with better shared data. But this is also where the private sector participation in regional investment really matters. When each country does its own quiet analysis in isolation, we get 15 versions of the same anxiety. But when business leaders engage through CARICOM structures, through chambers or board industry groups like this one, we can start building common positions around energy projects, around shipping, correspondent banking, and present a more coherent face to the world. Because a long standoff is less dangerous when the region shows up as a block, rather than, disjointed. And if we've compared notes on a few red lines and priorities, that's going to put us in a stronger position. The worst of these scenarios, not the worst, best case scenario is third possibilities of managed easing of tensions. So people kind of back down a little bit. There's an arrangement that lowers the temperature, and we get a little breathing space. It would be welcome. But if we treat it as a return to the old normal, and that is a phrase that comes from the COVID era, you will have problems because we haven't learned anything. We can't just go back. The next shock will just have a different label. It was COVID before, now it's this. We have to be deliberately, as boards, building buffers. So individual firms, you have to strengthen your balance sheets, modernize your systems, invest in better forecasting, deepen sensible regional partnerships rather than rushing back to business as usual. And then for the region, you still have the same problems. There's no practical integration, no shared infrastructure, no common digital systems for trade, regional capital market development. So what happens now is we're prepared for the next external jolt and we don't feel so fragmented. I think under all three scenarios, one theme repeats itself, right? It's small states cannot control the quarrel. But what we can control is the narrative of how scattered or united we are in facing it. Boards often talk about sovereignty and regionalism as if they're just the business of politicians. But in reality, this is very much the business of the private sector. Where you choose to source, where you choose to invest, which regional forums you bother to support, what joint ventures you entertain. These are all decisions that reinforce CARICOM or undermine them. So, from my perspective, sitting in a Trinidad company that trades across the region, the most useful thing we can do is behave as though the Caribbean is like an interconnected space and organize our risk thinking accordingly. So that means seeing a Trinidad risk, a Guyana risk, a Barbados risk, and the Venezuelan and US risk as part of a bigger picture, not all these disconnected stories. It means pushing our boards to ask when they see a geopolitical headline, not only what does this do to us, but who in the region do we need to be coordinating with? We are too small and too exposed to continue operating like isolated islands and big people quarrel. If tensions escalate, the companies and the countries that have built regional shock absorbers will bend rather than break. But if the tensions drag on and those who have embedded regional data and cooperation into their governance will have fewer blind bets that they're making. If tensions ease, they'll use that calm to strengthen regional integration. So we'll be better placed for what comes next. But we cannot script, as Kamla said earlier in her introduction, we can't script Washington or Caracas. That is not our purview. But we can absolutely decide whether we show up as a collection of spectators or as a region that understands vulnerabilities and prepare ourselves to act together. Because the choice sits squarely in our boardrooms, in those business associations, and how seriously we take CARICOM beyond the speeches. So I know that I rattle on quite a bit, but this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I hope that I have illuminated at least my point of view on this. And I think my common thread is very simple. We act together or we fall alone.
Thank you so much, Rishma. I think that that was a really, really brilliant start to our conversation today. I really appreciated the different scenarios and how you sketched it out, very properly in the way that it can impact private sector. And as the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute, I am all for what you are saying, that there should be this regional conversation that makes us stronger together so that we could ensure that we are prepared to deal with all this uncertainty. So thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite Lorraine to share her perspective. I know Lorraine will be talking specifically with respect to the tourism sector. So Lorraine, we are all ears. Over to you.
Basically, tourism. Now, the difference between Rishma's focus is hard, tangible business product and environment. In tourism, it's more about the intangible and creating an experience for visitors to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, one of the most important considerations that we need to look at is that we have internal factors that we need to consider and we have external factors that we need to consider. Most of the times, the external factors, we have no say in what is going on there. We cannot do anything about it. What we need to do is find a creative and positive way as to how we are going to respond to these external factors that will affect us. Some of these external factors could be what we are experiencing right now, which is the whole Venezuela-US situation. We are smack bang in the middle of it. CARICOM, all the CARICOM countries, the Caribbean countries, our regional partners, most of them pride themselves on tourism being the backbone of their economies. We didn't. It was always gas and oil. And therefore, tourism over the many, many years has been treated, and I will use some local parlance here, as the outside child. So how do we mitigate the internal factors that will help us to deal with this situation? I was privileged to attend the PSOT launch yesterday, which is the private sector organization of Trinidad and Tobago. And for the first time, there was a breath of fresh air in that we saw government being willing to partner with private sector in how we manage the business of Trinidad and Tobago. And tourism was highlighted. So, it looks like if this outside child is finally going to be adopted and become part of the family. That being so, it means that we should have a seat at the table, not only to discuss how we're going to manage what is happening now, but how are we going to prepare for what comes after any of the three scenarios. For tourism, it's a little different than what Rishma would have spoken about, because all three scenarios, especially the first two, affect us very much in the fact that people travel to a destination for a couple of reasons. One is because they want to be immersed into the culture. They want to be immersed into the experience of visiting a new destination. But most of all, they want to be safe. And if we look back at our history and the various advisories that have been coming out for Trinidad and Tobago, those advisories have not been very good. And as a matter of fact, Germany just put in one because of the fact that we have this situation taking place within our waters. Okay, so we have all these advisories out there where people are looking at it before they choose to come to a particular destination. We also have the, what can I say, the unfortunate thing that we are considered a country that has a high level of crime. It's how we report it. Now, in most countries, when there are issues, a lot of countries all over the world have the issues that we have. But because of the proactive stance of the government of the day, what you find happening is a lot of damage control will be done. And I can use the most recent one with Tobago when the gentleman was attacked by the shark. But the damage control was such that this gentleman was able to go to World Travel Market and speak on behalf of Tobago to promote Tobago. Not because of his unfortunate incident, but because of how it was handled and the damage control that was put in place. So I think that with the tourism sector, which is an intangible product that all we really have control over is the internal, That means the private-public sector partnerships and how we treat with issues that will affect us. We need to seriously look at not only getting through this particular period, but what are we going to do to make sure that we are back on the space, we're back in the space, and that people are aware that we are open for business. Rishma spoke about COVID. COVID-19 practically decimated the tourism sector. That we need to have this collaboration. We need to be able to sit and say, okay, how can we help the industry stay afloat with their neck above water while this thing is being sorted out? Now, many years ago, we had started what we call a domestic tourism campaign, which is doing tours and different kind of experiences within Trinidad and Tobago for our own people to be able to enjoy. So they may have problems in going abroad, but it also means that they can holiday at home, they can learn about what we have, and they can become our very good ambassadors to promote Trinidad and Tobago. And in that process, we will still keep money flowing through the supply chain, because you will still have to hire the transportation providers, you'll still have to go to the sites and attractions, you'll still have to hire your tour guides, you'll still have to do what you have to do. Okay, so I mean, and you could even have people from Trinidad going to Tobago, Tobago coming to Trinidad, Port of Spain going to Toco. I mean, we have so many sites and attractions. So one of the things we may need to consider is, why is this thing is sorting itself out? That we are also ensuring that we are engaging in some kind of activity within the domestic market to keep people afloat. Now, that being said, it means that we also need to look at how do we ensure that whilst we are doing this, our product offerings will be brought up to a certain standard, so that when we are open for business again as usual, and the things have sorted out, your scenario 3, that it would mean that we're ready for business and we can promote, market, and be able to provide international standards within the destination for our people. So to me, it's an opportunity for us to sit back, review our product offerings, do something with it in the meantime, be proactive. Don't just sit down and say, oh, woe is me. We can't do that. We have to prepare for the future. And this is going to pass. One way or the other, this is going to pass. And when we look at countries around the world, there are many countries who have had some issues, but their tourism still goes on. It still goes on because you have people managing the perception. So to manage the perception also means to say that we need to be doing some marketing, international marketing, which has to be done by the government, where we can do, I mean, IT and social media is very active. We can do reports from various people who have enjoyed what we have here, and it is blasted all over the place. Those things are important, because you know how many people are on the Facebook every day, on Instagram every day, just looking for stories of good luck stories or happy stories. They're looking for it. They look for bad too, but they're looking for that too. So I think, yes, it is affecting us. I have received, not only because as the president of the Coalition of the Tourism Associations, we have members from both Tobago and Trinidad in that. And we have received notice of cancellations of bookings in the hotels, some of the bed and breakfast, cancellations for groups coming in for tours. We have also had cancellations for groups coming off the cruise lines, because yes, you have certain people who manage the cruise shipping industry who have one or two people who manage most of it, but you do have groups who come off those same cruise lines who go with other operators, and those other operators have been saying that there has been a reduction. We have also been seeing that even those cruise lines that were committed to coming down here, what you are seeing is, say, a cruise line, for example, last week had 1,900 and something people on board, only 400 went on tour. That means that the rest of them stayed on the ship. That's not normally the case. Normally, it's the reverse. The 400 would stay on the ship and the rest would go on tour. So we are seeing that there was also that hesitation, even though you think you're safe on that ship in port, to come off because you don't know what may happen. Okay, so there are a lot of things we need to consider, but I think that we need to get around a table with the government. We need to be looking at what can we do to sustain it now so that people are not on the breadline. how can we still use this opportunity domestically to help our people to be able to holiday at home, to help our people to be able to understand that they are going to be called upon to be ambassadors for the destination. For the government to also look at how can they assist the various stakeholders to stay afloat. Okay, because we need to stay afloat so that when we open back up, because from the minister's address yesterday, tourism is very important. And it is one of the easiest ways to earn foreign exchange. It is one of the easiest ways to earn foreign exchange. And I will use the example of the cruise ships here. Every time a cruise ship comes into port, you got to pay a head tax to the port authority for everybody who's on that ship. Okay, so when we don't have the numbers, then we have a problem. Okay, St. Lucia, for example, has over 600 calls this cruise ship season. We have 40 something. So we need to understand why we're not having what we're supposed to have. And so I think it's a holistic thing. And because of the formation of the private sector organization of Trinidad and Tobago, I think that being able to network with other business organizations would certainly help us, because we can be approaching them and working with them to put on events, to put on conferences, and we manage it under the tourism heading, because we are all event planners in tourism. We can certainly help to keep things at home moving. And that is what I'm seeing is going to be important, that we need to make sure that the economy keeps moving within the destination, that we can liaise, as Rishma said, with the various CARICOM countries, the other regional countries, but that we, with our ministry and the various ministries, look at how can we prepare ourselves, because this is going to blow over sooner or later. And we need to look at, are we going to be ready to receive people when that time comes? I think that's enough for now, and I'll answer anything else in question and answer.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I think that contribution was really, really very useful. The notion of having domestic tourism, I think, is a great one, especially as you tied it to the fact that it gives you time to improve the quality of the product. And I want to give an example. I myself had been to the Caroni Bird Sanctuary on a boat tour with some friends, and I found it was such a beautiful experience when our board for CCGI came to Trinidad and Tobago for our board retreat. I took them there for that experience, and they all loved it. So that is such a good example of how what you are saying works. And the focus, as you say, is as this conflict brings its own set of tension here in the region, how do we ensure that the local businesses are able to still find ways to function, to keep the money and the supply going, that prevents a total loss for everyone. So thank you so much, Lorraine.
Okay, welcome. Are you seeing me still? Because
yes.
Okay.
So you're
Okay.
still here with us. No worries.
All right.
Okay. And now I'd like to ask Ken Hackshaw. Ken, I know I have to tell you, Ken, I look forward to your weekly emails. Those tidbits on managing risk are so thought-provoking. I've told myself I have to start building them and keep a little catalog. So anytime I want to be inspired, let me look for a Ken Hackshaw post and see what
just remind me to invoice you separately for that, though, eh?
What I do. Thank you, Ken. So we look forward to hearing from you now with respect to this situation.
Okay, great. And I must say thank you, Kamla, for giving me this opportunity. And kudos to you and the Institute for doing what you're doing. And especially with regard to this risk we are facing. I want to reference a couple points that both Reshma and Lorraine mentioned, and so, but let me start with this. I come at this from the perspective of having actually done a deep dive or risk assessment into the scenarios that we have before us. If the U.S. attacks a protracted standoff, and if U.S. retreats. And that speaks to something you, Kamla, mentioned earlier, which is have private sector and government agencies built in these scenarios. And I fear from where I sit that they have not. Some may have done so. And so I think this webinar, and maybe you and through your board could reach out to organizations. And I dare say not just private. I know this speaks more specifically to the private sector, but my take, especially in Trinidad and Tobago and dare I say the wider Caribbean, the government is the largest employer. The government spends and invests in these private companies. So I think it starts there. And to Lorraine's point when she spoke of government involvement and sitting down with it, yeah, that needs to happen. But my fear is, folks, I don't know if the government is even doing that. And when I speak, I tend to invoke my kid's name, and I say I don't give advice. I say to them, I don't give advice along a path I've not taken, right? And I've done a lot of work with government institutions across the Caribbean. I alluded to why I haven't traveled to some of those islands, because risk management starts with you personally, individually. So I tend to try and manage my personal risk. So I would have had to travel to actually St. Vincent this week. I sit on a board there and they have an AGM and I was supposed to be there. And well, I can't be there because I'm not going to travel there in case Mr. Trump gets up and says, okay, let's go forward. So let me address each of those scenarios. So if US attacks, and Reshma again mentioned this, I would advise folks to throw out whatever business continuity plans they may have had in the past, whether it's for COVID or for hurricanes. This is a game changer. This is, I don't want to use the word unprecedented, but for the Caribbean it is. God forbid the US attacks Venezuela. I'm going to use the word, and this is not fear-mongering here, literally, all bets are off as we know business transactions to be. Airspace is going to be locked down. Maritime traffic is going to be locked down. Reshma spoke eloquently about possible scenarios for navigating if with shipments and deliveries. I don't think that may be even practical, given the proximity of Trinidad to Venezuela. And let's be, and I need us to be very realistic when dealing with this possible scenario. And we have to also invoke what the parties themselves are saying. Maduro and his folks there in Venezuela, Trump and his folks. And I think one of the other speakers may have mentioned this. I think it was Reshma. Let's not be fooled by the close relationship we believe Trinidad now has with the US. If this goes sideways and the US attacks, US is for the US. I mean, I'm a US citizen, but I'm also a citizen of the Caribbean. And Trump and his folks' prime first objective will be US protection. Yeah. Maduro and his folks in comments and in the public has actually said that Trinidad is a target. If the US attacks, then what? Yeah. And then the US goes and plants a radar in Tobago. Prime target. So in building scenarios, in building a scenario planning for private and more so for government, if the first scenario eventuates, i.e. US attacks, there's so much that will go wrong. Trade and logistics. So let me step back a second. So we talk about business continuity. I have advocated, and I've done in the last 2 weeks about 2 or 3 business continuity exercises for clients. I have said to, and this is for Lorraine, and for Rishma and the world they live in. What about your clients, right? So your business is going to be impacted. Yeah, the clients you depend on for revenue, they will be impacted. How prepared are they? Yeah, your critical, not just your critical suppliers, your critical iron clients. Yeah, how prepared are they if this goes sideways? What about your own personal continuity plan for your home? Yeah. So that first scenario, ladies and gentlemen, I could evangelize on this for the next couple hours, and and that's not feasible now. But my suggestion is start with that as the most likely probable outcome. And again, I don't take any comfort in saying this, but in my past life, one of the things we used to work on is country risk assessments. So we take hard data, we take what the leaders are saying, we marry the two and come out with a diagnostic. And as I sit here today, and I hope I'm wrong, we talk about in the risk management space probability. It's more likely than not that the first scenario will happen. It's more likely than not. And with each passing day, and I think Reshma alluded to this yesterday, the U.S. seized an oil tanker. Yeah, which escalates even further. Right now, having said that the probability of the first scenario is higher than the other two, conversations are still happening, right? So I just want to specifically state with reference to the first likely scenario that I'm not comfortable. I'm not in a good space as to the preparation entities are for the likely event this occurs. Let's start with the government. And I'm not casting a very wide net here because I know of some private and Rishma in speaking and in listening to her, it seems as though her and her entities or companies are very much aware of the possibilities around that probability. And I dare hope others are thinking the same way. But there are a lot of leaders, decision makers whose heads are still in the sand. And I know quite a few of them. But it's up to folks like you, Kamla, and your institution, and I dare say ours, to continue to try and alert these guys that yes, all three scenarios are very much possible, and as the movies will sometimes tell us, we pray for the best but plan for the worst, and plan is needed. I have clients who literally have no business continuity plans, right? And some who may have, but it's more for things that they're aware of or that would have occurred in the past, a hurricane, an earthquake. That's not the same. It's not the same. So, and there's so much. I think I did an article in The Guardian a couple of months ago about what can go wrong if this risk eventuates, if the first scenario comes to pass. There's so much impact, and not just Trinidad. To the wider Caribbean, but Trinidad as well. For a matter of fact, I have a client in St. Vincent, and I said to them, the pronouncements that the former Prime Minister was making, Raul Gonzalez, given who is the President of the United States right now, and how he views comments about the U.S., I have said to one or two clients, your risk exposure continues to escalate the more this goodly gentleman speaks about supporting Venezuela. And this is me speaking to a client. Yeah. And conversely, the Prime Minister of Trinidad right now, who's I would use the word advocate for the US and supported by the US, and now is being viewed a bit differently by our CARICOM neighbors as to being too supportive. I mean, what does that do for CARICOM unity? Richmond rightly suggesting, I believe, Lorraine, as well as connecting the dots, getting the Caribbean entities to join forces, so to speak. Is that possible now? Because collectively, yeah, they can convey and be more strengthened in their responses or in their advocacy for keeping the region safe. But if there's that disconnect among them, I mean, what does that say for that unity? Yeah. So there's a plethora of risk to Trinidad and Tobago, private and public, that can and will eventuate if the first scenario happens. And you guys could go on to or as Kamla suggested, I've written extensively about what some of these risks are, and so it's out there in the public domain, and it's not good. So, all right, so that's the first part. I think I want to mention something about boards. All of the Lorraine, Reshmer, and I think you, Kamla, might have spoken to the role of the board, and rightly so, in their decision-making capacity. Having worked a number of boards, I challenged the risk intelligence of some boards or board members specifically. And I fear, and there are exceptions, and I've worked with quite a few of them. There are exceptions to this, of course, but if they can't think it, they can't act on it. And if they believe that this will pass, then they're already behind the 8 ball. And so my fear is that if we sit back and singularly depend on boards to make right decisions, I think that might be a failing proposition. And in the essence of full disclosure, I sit on a board, and I dare say this is not tooting my own horn. I'll give you a good example. I was supposed to be on a board meeting today because of the AGM. Later on, the board meeting was scheduled for 11 o'clock today, and I couldn't attend, so they changed it to 1, right? But there must be someone on the board with a level of risk intelligence or risk, a high RIQ, risk intelligence quotient, that knows this kind of stuff and can speak to these types of things. Finance and lawyers and experts are all great, but just as you need to have someone with cybersecurity, AI, technology skill sets on boards, you need someone with this risk management skill set and experience to drive, especially in these polycrises happening. Because even in Trinidad, you have this, but then you have negotiations with unions, you have crime, you have, back and forth issues between the government and the opposition. So there are a number of moving parts. Same for Jamaica. They're coming out of a Cat 5, so their heads are there. How much focus and attention is being paid to this, right? And so that's the other part of it. Where on their radar is this possibility of US attacking Venezuela as a high probability event? How much attention is this getting? And I fear maybe not enough. I love what Reshmer spoke to, so I am comforted by that, but I don't know how many leaders there are like Reshmer. Reshmer, I think you need to do your own little webinar, invite your colleagues and, manage upward. Okay, so that's the first one. The protracted, this continuing in a protracted way, which is another possibility, is as disruptive, probably, well, not is as disruptive, but is very disruptive because, again, both Reshma and Lorraine spoke to this. That continued uncertainty with investors and visitors is continues to increase as this is protracted. I mean, even Germany, to Lorraine's point on tourism, Germany just put out, I think it was yesterday, warning to their citizens about visiting Trinidad and Tobago, right? And yes, they would not necessarily speak to the US-Venezuela conflict, but they'll use everything else in between. And as I said earlier, if I, as a risk practitioner, is saying, I am fearful of traveling to Caribbean islands in case, God forbid, the strike a day after I land, I'm stuck there. Others will be thinking the same way. I advise clients, don't do it because you don't know what tomorrow will bring with this goodly gentleman called President Donald Trump. And so the second option of protracted negotiations around should they attack or should they not attack is disruptive because decisions are going to be made or are being made because of that uncertainty. Oh, and by the way, risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on achieving objectives. And so if from the tourism aspect, if folks think that I get on a cruise ship and how am I getting to Caribbean if the Caribbean waters and there's an attack by the US and then maritime traffic is disrupted. I mean, how is that? I mean, so and then the airspace is locked down. What does that do? Folks are asking me if they should travel to Carnival, Trinidad to Carnival. I'm planning to come for Carnival, but if the airspace is on lockdown, why? Yeah. So if there's a protraction with what's currently taking place, there is direct impact to the economies of the Caribbean, to decision making as to even within the islands of the Caribbean, should we do whatever we planned on doing based on our strategic objectives, 25 into 26? Should we delay these investments? And then that translates into, should we delay hiring any more individuals or increasing, giving salary increases because we don't know what the impact to our bottom line can be? So there's that cascading risk impact. Yeah.
Thanks,
the third
Ken.
one, obviously, that's Nirvana.
Yeah, I think you have
That's it.
identified what you think is the real risk, and you have given us much food for
Yeah.
thought on that. And I have to tell you, I feel very sad. A comment that you made that I think is very real, but to say that if we depend on boards to make the right decision, that might be a failing proposition.
Yes. Yeah. It is.
Because you are right in that do we have enough risk intelligence in the boardroom? So something to think about. But at this point, I want to invite Martha so we can hear from her, and then we open up to Q&A because I'm sure there's already a question in the chat from Edward. So I'm sure others would want to ask questions to make a contribution too. So Martha, we are so happy you are joining us from Jamaica. I thank the Jamaica Chamber for speaking with you and offering you as a representative here. So we look forward to hearing your contribution now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be here. As a CEO of a company that exports rum, bulk rum internationally, and also as the first vice president of the chamber, it impacts me in a very different way, in several ways, in several hats I'll put on to review the situation. So when we're looking at it, the situation unfolding between Venezuela and the United States is not a distant geopolitical drama. It is happening in our neighborhood. Right? And the Caribbean sits directly, oh, hold on 1 second. Right, and the Caribbean sits directly in line of economic, social, and security consequences. As business leaders, we have a responsibility to understand what these scenarios mean for our organizations and for Jamaica's economy. I want to approach this discussion wearing two hats. First, as the CEO of National Rums, where supply chain stability, energy costs, and export reliability are central to our survival. And second, as the first vice president of the chamber, representing the broader business community. So the first scenario, US attack on Venezuela. And we'll have an active conflict zone in the Caribbean. If the United States were to launch an attack on Venezuela, the impact on Jamaica and the region would be immediate and severe. For NRJ, the first challenge would be shipping disruption, or rum exports, molasses imports, fuel deliveries, container movements, rely on safe and predictable Caribbean sea lanes. In a conflict, insurers raise premiums overnight, vessels reroute, transit times increase, costs surge. That directly affects production, cash flow, and our ability to fulfill international contracts. And I know this is something that Reshma spent a lot of time talking about, and she so eloquently put together what the real challenges are. Everybody has spoken about CARICOM and how we come together as a union, and how do we plan for these changes in routes that could occur? How can we help each other through this transitional period or this crisis period? Second is the energy cost volatility. Any instability in Venezuela, oil reverberates across the Caribbean. Jamaica's fuel prices would spike, directly impacting distillery operations and logistics. For a manufacturing company, energy is not an abstract risk. It shows up immediately in the cost of goods and the profitability. Third, we've spoken about it, financial and foreign exchange volatility. And more broadly, a decline in tourism, as Lorraine has so comprehensively shared with us, which affects on-island consumption. Now, Jamaica is not directly within the strike point, but, or as close a proximity to the strike point as Trinidad is. But don't be fooled. That will have just as impactful, it will be just as impactful for Jamaica. Once they put out that warning, travel notice goes out, we felt it. We felt it whenever they put it out against Jamaica. Your tourist rate can decline by 50% easily. And when we now speak about the risks, as Ken has shared, his concerns about travel, I hear you, Ken. But we can't live if we get into a situation of the second scenario where it's a protracted period. We have to plan.
Mm-hmm.
When I get to St. Vincent, when I land in St. Vincent, I have my plan B to leave St. Vincent. So my plan B to leave St. Vincent, okay? But business must go on, and it's critical for us to have our inputs, etc. So in everything that comes to plan B, and planning is critical for anything that in this point. So I segue now into my scenario 2, where we're talking about the planning. This is the opportunity for us to prepare for, we're already in this scenario 2 of a prolonged standoff. We're already here. So all these issues of what expectations are on the ongoing supply chain, the rising insurance costs, the commodity price instability, we're already beginning to feel them. And as Ken said, in Jamaica, where we're already facing the impacts of a Cat 5, and we're so focused on a Cat 5, but this is another catastrophe like COVID looming in the background. How do we, as private individuals, plan for this. This is an opportunity, a prolonged standoff. The risks already, we're in that period. So the risks are here. We need to recognize that we're in this period. And as a board, as private sector individuals, because I can only speak to the private sector, engage the people we need to engage. If we need to engage the government, we need to do so. But this is an opportunity for us to deal with all the risks that we face, cybersecurity risks. We know that if whenever Russia becomes involved in geopolitical conflict, critical industries become targets of cybersecurity attacks. Energy facilities, logistics systems, and manufacturers must be prepared for heightened cyber threats. We now need to begin to think about it, because war doesn't start the day they fire the first bomb. They have done their planning before, and everything will hit you. So we have to be prepared at this point for all of the cybersecurity risks, etc., that could come at us. Well, if there's a settlement between the USA and Venezuela, as Reshma said, this is the most favorable outcome because it avoids active conflict. It restores some predictability to trade routes, commodity markets. For NRJ and for the Jamaican economy and for the members of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, this would allow us to plan more confidently, stabilize our shipping schedules, resume long-term contracting. But even here, sanctions and political uncertainty do not disappear. The business risk remains elevated, is simply more manageable. It's back to status quo, which is that a good thing? Is status quo a good thing? We know what it is, but is it really a good thing for long-term sustainability? I think I may have said enough. So Kamla, there's more I can say, but I think I'm going to wrap up now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martha. I really appreciate that perspective that you have shared as well, which is, the crisis is here. We are living it. And I actually love how you ended. It is an opportunity for us. It's not just a crisis. It's an opportunity for us to look at our status quo. How are we doing business and how do we expect to really improve in the long term? So let me invite all of our panelists back on. We do only have 20 minutes remaining for this session, for the discussion, but I think each of you really spoke very, very effectively at the three scenarios. Ken has provided the first scenario being the most likely of the three, in which case, how exactly are you planning in your boardrooms? And Reshma, I'm coming to you first. I know there was a question from Edward to you, but the thing is, as a businesswoman in this very active scenario, what are some of the things that we should be doing today, considering that
we actually did it today.
Right.
So I had a meeting with the board, C-suites, and the auditors, and said, hey, we need to put in line items on our balance sheets immediately to hedge for this change, because my issues are going to be twofold, and I can only speak for me, right? But I think a lot of private businesses. One, what's going to happen to my people, right? I want to be able to secure my people. Ken made a very good point. What's your personal risk? So I want to deal with that aspect of it. I think that's my immediate jump off. Like, I need to protect my people. Yes, okay, maybe we could switch to a hybrid model, or there's a bunch of other things, but you're talking about a run on the banks. You're talking about inability to move around the country. You're talking about curfews. And I am starting to put teeth to a plan and get the board behind me to say, put your money where your mouth is. And let's put in things to make sure that these people are taken care of and that we have the liquidity to do so. Because if there is an emergency scenario, which I, cross my fingers, my toes, my everything I can, does not come to pass, But here's a valid point. We can't stick our head in the sand and pretend it's not going to happen. If it is going to happen, I need an actual plan, an action plan. And I think my priority is to protect my people. I have to make sure.
Thank you
Well
very
said.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. Because even as I listen to Ken, the same thoughts were going through my head as well. What would be the impact on CCGI staff? How will we manage? To a great extent, we function virtually on an ongoing basis. But as Martha said, even that cannot be taken for granted, because if there are cyber attacks, all of us
Yeah.
are vulnerable. And therefore, what does that mean for the ability to continue to function and ensure that we are able to productively manage the space and not just be sitting ducks? So it requires a level of conversation now, and I'm so happy that all of our panelists spoke to regional conversation as well. How do we support each other in this space? Because as Martha said, Jamaica is not as close in a striking distance as Trinidad and Tobago is, but the impact will be very real. And I really appreciated your very clear and practical response just now, Rishma, in terms of, okay, so what is this going to look like in my balance sheet? Because that too need to be accounted for as we make our plans. So I'm just looking at the chat very quickly to see if there were any questions that can be answered in a very short time frame, because that's what we have. I see Edward had asked for what are possible solutions to make sure that there is resilience in the event that there is this risk. Well, he's talking about the fact that we are fragmented, as a region. How do we build this alliance more closely? One thing I do is what we're doing here.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, if you speak about alliance, if you're speaking from a government's perspective, because from the private sector, I'm sure you guys, in the case of Martha and Rishma and even Lorraine, you guys would have interdependencies with respect to sectors in other countries, and so that relationship continues. But given the comments that have been made thus far and still being made, I'm not confident that we would have an alliance that is as collective and interconnected as it should be vis-a-vis CARICOM. I don't believe that's possible at this stage. That horse has bolted.
Sad.
But that's where we are.
If that's what the real situation.
Can I say something, please?
Sure, go ahead, Lorraine.
All your points were very important, but Ken spoke about the fact that we need to look at our personal safety. If our personal safety is compromised, we will not be in a position emotionally or psychologically to think about anybody else's safety. That's the first thing. We first have to take care of ourselves, our immediate families, ourselves. Then we could look at taking care of the people who work for us or who we relate with. Because, and I also agree with him on the fact that I don't think we could hold up any hope for CARICOM coming to our aid. Everybody is going to have to bat in their corner, because this is a serious matter. We don't understand how serious it is. And I think we need to be doing, as a country, Trinidad and Tobago, a SWOT analysis at the government level of the risks associated with any of those three scenarios, which we are not hearing about. We have to do that, because we need to know what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are the opportunities, etc. We have to look at it, and we need to know, okay, so if this scenario comes through, do we have enough medical supplies? Can we handle if there's serious fallout because of attacks or etc., etc.? We need to look at it, and it cannot just be that the government will have the answers. It has to be a collective thing, because everybody is going to be affected by this. And remember, the last comment is that Trinidad and Tobago is not only at risk for this situation, but we also have a state of emergency that was in effect and was extended and goes into next year.
Polycrises.
Okay, so we have a crisis on our hands.
Yeah.
It's
you
that
know, we
volatile
really,
world
it's
that
Yeah.
we
very
live in.
volatile.
So,
And
Lorraine,
we
I
are
want to say though, as much as we do want to know and be part of the conversation at a wider national level, it's important, as Ken said, that within businesses, each
Yeah.
board
Yeah.
need to do its own what.
Of course.
Yeah.
But and we
Board
also
room.
need to understand that we really don't go by our motto, discipline, tolerance, and production. We
Yeah.
have a lot of tolerance, but we have a lot of tolerance for the wrong things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And therefore,
That.
we just move, we move with the flow and we say, it's going to work out, man. Don't worry about it. God is a Trini. No, God helps those who help themselves.
I have a
So,
question.
go ahead,
Go
Reshma.
ahead, God, Rishma.
So I have a question in particular, I think maybe for Martha, because I think it would be interesting, because there's a lot of trainees on this panel, right? So I'd be curious from the outside looking in, particularly from your chamber experience or your that level of experience. What happens Monday morning? So let's say no matter what the scenario is, whether something happens or it doesn't, they back away, whatever happens, when the Americans pack up and go, and we are left behind in the wake of it. You think that the Venezuelans are going to just forgive and forget? Or,
Hell
I mean,
no.
what Monday morning?
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
What's
So,
your thoughts on that?
so what's my thoughts on that? So I come back to it is. So I'll go back to what Lorraine said about what needs to happen in house. Now, our experience in Jamaica has been phenomenal coming out of Melissa and the support we've gotten from CARICOM. So I do believe strongly that CARICOM will support if they are able to, right? So there was a brief period that nobody could get into Jamaica. Once something happens in Venezuela, it's very unlikely that anybody's want to go by air or sea into Trinidad. So the ability to support Trinidad disappears. Any support that needs to be given to Trinidad needs to happen, be thought about, be considered, and figured out how it's going to happen now. You can't wait until D-Day to make that decision. In terms of, as I said, Jamaica is on the periphery, but our economies are all tied, right? Our economies are all tied. And on Monday morning, if there is an economy in Trinidad that is severely impacted, it's going to severely impact our ability to get glass bottles. It's going to impact our ability to get some of our many things that we import from Trinidad. Okay. So Monday morning, what's it going to look like? There are going to be challenges that we all face. Right? We get IT support from Trinidad. We get all kinds of things from Trinidad. So you can't disassociate yourself. All the Caribbean economies, no economy is strong enough to stand on our own. So we
No, we are.
stand as a CARICOM region for a reason. We're called a Caribbean for a reason. We fight for all kinds of different reasons. But as an economic region, we are tied together for a reason. Yeah. So what does Monday morning look like? I don't know. Like I said,
Not good.
like you said, Reshma, we need to sit down with our boards and figure that out. Right? It's a reality check for us all. But it's a very uncertain Monday morning. That's what I'm sure of.
And what I'd like to see is that there would be phone calls being made immediately, connections between people who know each other, finding out exactly what is happening at ground zero, being able to find ways to see if what was planned is now possible, and if there needs to be some other realignment so that there is the level of support and continuity that is required. And I think this will grow our maturity in the region tremendously. I agree with Martha. CARICOM did respond very well. I was very pleased with when Jamaica was impacted. So when there's something for which we have experienced, and so we know what is needed, there's usually a good response. But in this scenario, we are dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what makes it difficult. As Ken said, you have to now build that ability to see the risks that has not yet materialized even, and consider the impact on you, consider the impact on your clients as well.
Yeah.
And that way you can even get the support of clients who may feel that they are in a safe zone, but who themselves will now feel the impact in different ways. And in the interim, figure out how do we ensure that there's the connectivity that helps us to manage this together. Because I totally agree. It's as much as the first impact is to individuals, to selves, and to those immediate to us, the coming out of it. How do we rebuild and how do we ensure that there's that business continuity? We are going to need that.
Yeah, if I need to add one level, another word to that. So it's not just about business continuity. With that then comes your resilience framework. How do we then go beyond recovering? And as I said to folks, it's not just about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward, right? So it's disaster preparedness, business continuity through the disaster, and then resilience, going beyond that. And so those are the conversations that we need to that ought to be having, that aren't being had. It's not being. I'm not comfortable that this conversation is occurring at the government level, at ministries. Well, I know for a fact they aren't at some of them, on many of the islands, and in the private sector. I know some are. Rishma, a very good example, and Lorraine and Martha. But what about the others? And Martha, as Martha stated, she has dependencies here in Trinidad that will impact her. So third party and fourth party risks is critical. That the management of those in a disaster. So what are the plans for that? You know, if I can't get my raw materials coming to me, how do I then produce what I need to produce? Where will my income come from if I'm not producing the goods to sell? So hey, all right, don't get me started. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
We are in the last 5 minutes of today's session, though, and Ken, as you did slip in to that, you have an AGM to attend in 5 minutes' time as well. We will have to wrap up exactly on time. I would like to think that in the crisis comes great opportunities. We need to identify what that opportunity is for us and be able to move out of that comfort zone and that status quo, which we have smoothly gone back into, as Reshma said, following COVID, with all the disruptions and all the changes. Life went back to no new normal. It is as though there were no real lessons learned from COVID, other than, of course, the embracing of online opportunities like these. So we have to think about what may be those opportunities for our businesses as we live in this polycrisis. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists to consider what is that last thought that you would want to share with our participants here who are from around the region. We are not clear which of the three likely scenarios. I want to pray that Ken is wrong in this one instance, that the scenario is not likely to be all-out war, but we have no control over which of the scenarios is likely to happen. So what would be your closing comment for our participants to ensure that we really build that mindset of preparedness and readiness?
Can I go ahead?
Sure, you can go first, Lorraine.
So I just want to say that any of these scenarios is going to have a very negative fallout on us, any of them. And whilst we are concerned about ourselves and our businesses, we also need, as the country of Trinidad and Tobago, to be concerned about our nationals. We need to be concerned about our people. We have elected a government that is to take care of our people. We are part of being our people, and therefore there needs to be collaboration as to how we can mitigate any of the three scenarios so that we can still be standing when this whole issue is over. It's a serious issue, and we cannot just sweep it under the rug. This is not one to be swept under the rug. This is one to be opened, taken apart, looked at, and see if there's anything to salvage from any of the three scenarios. And we must be prepared. That's all I can say. We must be prepared.
Thank you very much, Lorraine.
All right. I'll my final thoughts. Whether outcome is a conflict, a standoff, or a diplomatic deal, or a mix of all three, one thing is clear: the era of stable, predictable operating environments in the Caribbean is over. The companies that will survive and grow are those that invest early in resilience, risk oversight, and scenario-based strategy. As leaders, we cannot afford to be reactive. We must anticipate, we must plan, and we must build organizations capable of withstanding geopolitical shocks while continuing to deliver value to our employees, let's not forget them, as Reshma, that was your primary, one thing you focused on. Deliver value to our employees, our customers, and our country.
Thank you, Martha. Yeah, I think that's so clear. The period of stability is absolutely over. Ken, do you want to go next?
Yeah, Martha, I think I'll say that you're now like a full risk convert with that last comment. So you'll be getting a call from us. You know, the CRMA is always looking for folks like your good self, and to the panel as well. But I would like us not to forget the SMEs in this conversation. Yeah, if you think the larger corporations like the ones here or represented here may not be as prepared, what does that say for the mom and pops and the SMEs? You know, they will. Well, listen, COVID devastated that entire, for the most part, category of businesses. What do you think this is doing or will do? Yeah. So who's bringing them to the table? What conversations are they having? So I will end with this. I echo Kamla's. I hope I'm wrong, but let's prepare for the worst and pray for the best. You have to prepare. If it doesn't eventuate, great. But yeah.
Thanks so much, Ken. Reshma, you got the ball rolling with us today.
First
so
and last, right?
To ask you, yes, to close it off.
Well, I will leave my final thought as more of a question for people to consider. I would like you all to, as a group, Trinidad, Jamaica, any Barbados, any region at all, I want you to think about what happens. Do you think Venezuela is not going to hold a grudge? Do you realize that we could be on the cut? Because when, again, they sort out their business internally, they're not going to forget the role that we as the Caribbean, we as CARICOM, we as Trinidad played in whatever positioning we chose. And again, I am not a geopolitics person. I'm not an expert in that field, but I am a person who operates in this space. And people, and to say Trinidadians like the totes, you all have no idea what those Latin Americans are capable of. They will hold these things for generations against you. So I would like the group, the participants, and anybody you have this conversation with to remember that when this little snippet in the US's or Venezuelans history is over, we have to live now with the consequences of that. This is a relationship changer for us for a lifetime, not a moment. So, you know, this sounds like a Friday night conversation. If anybody wants to get back to me on LinkedIn and tell me what your synopsis was, I'm very happy to hear.
Thank you very, very much, Risha. Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
A shameful plug. Reshma, I'll bring the Money Musk Rum to have with you on that Friday conversation.
I'm there with that.
A shameful plug. shameless plug. And there was a point I wanted to make and I've forgotten to back up what Lorraine was saying.
Reshma's last point. This is a seismic shift in how businesses must start thinking about moving forward?
Especially because a lot of businesses have expanded into Latin America.
Yeah,
I
seismic
think
shift.
I think that provoked Martha. Go ahead, Martha.
I remember what it was. It was Ken's point about the SMEs. Now here's where we as the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce can help. And it's a thing I need to now have a conversation with my team and my chamber about is how can we help our SMEs through this time? How do we help our SMEs through this time?
We'll stay in touch because I have some stuff I'm doing with the Jamaicans now to help support.
Oh, thank you so much. Lovely to hear that.
Happy to connect you both so that this conversation can continue in very practical ways. So let me say, I think my major takeaway from this is us understanding that operating in silos is not going to get us anywhere. And what does that mean? It means having care for those around us as well. All of our panelists spoke about not just impact on their individual businesses, but on their clients, on their employees, on customers. And so if we are going to really be able to move ahead and build resilience, what we need to be looking at is a different level of care and compassion that doesn't come naturally to us, I think, in many respects. And I want to take Reshma's last question to heart. A lot of what happens outside of our organizations creates impact for us. How do we deal with it? If you have already extended your business line into Latin America, what is your next step? My recommendation will be build deeper relationships. Relationships will help us be able to talk out some of these differences, because what we don't want is to return to siloed approach where there's an us against them that's going to continue into generations. It is something we can handle with the right planning, with the foresight of the likelihood of this impact, and beginning to mitigate and build the relationships that's going to allow us to move forward together. I want to thank all of our panelists. Lorraine, who agreed. First of all, Lorraine, it was your article pointing out the cruise ships that canceled and all that really spurred me to put on this panel discussion, because it was clear that there was immediate impact that was happening in the business community, and we needed to ensure that directors understand this and are discussing it. Reshma, thank you so much. You've inspired me a lot with many of the critical thinking that you post on LinkedIn. I look forward to continuing to learn more from you on that. And thank you so much for agreeing to come and share your very practical experience and thoughts with us. Ken, it was a joy to have you on this panel, because I wanted to get you into our network, because we have to ensure that there's a very clear risk management voice. Because I agree with you. I really don't feel that the risk discussion is as deep as it need to be in boardrooms. And we have a responsibility as the Governance Institute, and wanting to improve governance practices, to raise that bar and to help bring it very much to the forefront. Martha, it was such a pleasure meeting you, and an absolute pleasure to continue to have this relationship with the Jamaica Chamber, that they participate and support our conversations. It demonstrates that relationship of togetherness and building and creating that unity, that it does not matter what CARICOM as a body does. We as Caribbean people will embrace each other and will support each other, and together we'll be able to get through this in the best way we can.
Yeah. Just remind Martha that embracing involves sending us that rum she promised us. And we all...
And you cannot forget that.
So let me also just thank our participants and ask you, please make sure to click on that link that was shared by Monique a few minutes ago. We do want your feedback on our sessions. It does help us truly in planning what are the things that are relevant to you, and ensure we stay on track with who we are as an institute and provide the best service that we can. So thank you all so very much for taking the time to join us. It was so great to have the many people who attended today's session. Have a wonderful Christmas season, everyone. Despite what is happening out there, there's beautiful parang, there's lots of awesome caroling that's going on, and it's a season of love and goodwill. Let's embrace
Thank you.
it as well.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You all. Have a
Right.
wonderful evening,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Lovely
Same
meeting
to
you.
you. Happy holidays.
Yes.